My daughter kicked me out of the car with no money, saying she was tired of taking care of me. But moments later, a stranger stepped forward, and his next words changed the entire direction of my broken life. I never imagined my life would unravel like this, honestly. It feels like a lifetime ago, looking back now. But my daughter, Anna, she truly was the light of my life. I remember her as this tiny, fierce little thing, always running, always getting into scrapes. I can still feel the weight of her small body in my arms, her tears hot on my shoulder after a scraped knee or a playground tiff. She'd cling to me, and I'd just hold her tight, promising her everything would be okay. After her father, my Mateo, passed away so suddenly, God, that was another wound that never truly healed. It was just the two of us. We were a team. A tiny, determined unit navigating life in our small 2-room apartment in Medellin. It was perched precariously on a hillside, overlooking a tangle of other homes and winding, dusty streets. I worked my fingers to the bone as a seamstress, the rhythmic hum of my old Singer machine a constant companion from dawn till late into the night. My hands, still calloused and pricked with countless needle marks even now, were always busy. I'd stitch anything, wedding dresses, school uniforms, even mend torn jeans for a few pesos, just to make sure Anna had what she needed. Not just food on the table, but a proper school uniform. A new pair of shoes when hers wore out, maybe even a small toy for Christmas. I wanted her to have a childhood filled with more comfort and fewer worries than mine had been, to give her the world if I could. Our barrio, La Ladera, was a world unto itself. It was a close-knit place, you know. Neighbors were like extended family. We might not have had much in terms of material wealth, but we had each other. We shared everything. A cup of sugar when you ran out, a pot of sancocho when someone was sick, the latest gossip exchanged over fences. The laughter of children echoed down the alleyways, the smell of coffee and fried plantains always in the air. It felt safe, communal, like everyone was looking out for everyone else. And in the heart of that was our little family, just Anna and me. I truly thought we had a bond that nothing could ever break. A deep, unspoken understanding forged through years of shared life, love, and yes, even hardship. We'd seen each other through so much. I thought we communicated with just a look, a shared sigh, a knowing smile. It wasn't a perfect life, not by a long shot. Money was always tight, worries were always lurking, but it was our life, and for so long, I honestly believed we were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. I built my whole world around that belief, around her. I never, not once considered that one day, that world would shatter, and she would be the one holding the hammer. Looking back now, with the cold clarity of hindsight, the signs were there, weren't they? They weren't like a sudden crack in the wall, more like tiny, almost invisible fissures that started to appear, growing more frequent, deeper, and harder to ignore with each passing month. What began as these small, almost imperceptible sighs of impatience from Anna, a slight shift in her posture when I'd ask for something, those things slowly, agonizingly, morphed into overt annoyance. It was like watching a beautiful old painting slowly fade, the vibrant colors dulling, the details blurring, and I, like an idiot, kept trying to restore it with my own hopes and denials. I remember this one time, I needed help with my pension paperwork. It's all so confusing, you know. Numbers, official stamps, government forms that seem designed to make you feel stupid. I called Anna, hesitantly, asking if she could spare an hour to look it over. I could almost feel her sigh through the phone line, a heavy exhalation that carried 1,000 unspoken complaints. When she finally came over, late, of course, she sat across from me at the small kitchen table, drumming her fingers impatiently on the worn laminate. Every time I'd point to a line or ask what a certain word meant, I'd see her eyes roll, quick and subtle, but I saw it. It was like a little dagger twisting in my gut. Her voice, when she spoke, was laced with this subtle exasperation, a tone that just screamed, "Can't you do anything yourself, Mama?" It wasn't a yell, not a fight, but it was worse in a way. It was a slow, quiet dismissal of my worth, of my needs. And then there were the doctor's appointments. My knees, you know, they're not what they used to be. The climb up to La Ladera can be a challenge on a bad day, and the bus routes are, well, they're not always kind to an old woman with aching joints. So, I'd ask Anna for a ride just once a month, maybe twice. Each time it became a negotiation, not with words, but with her body language. The way she'd check her watch constantly, the way her foot would tap an impatient rhythm on the car floor, the almost audible groan when I'd take a moment longer to get out of the car. Our visits, which used to be filled with chatter and laughter, became rushed, filled with a palpable desire for her to be somewhere else. I could feel it, like a chill in the air between us. It felt like she was counting the minutes until she could leave, until she could escape my presence, and I, her mother, the woman who raised her, was just another item on her endless checklist. A chore, a burden. I tried to dismiss it. Truly I did. My mind, bless its old, stubborn heart, kept trying to rationalize it away. She's just stressed, Teresa, I'd tell myself, looking at my reflection in the dim bathroom mirror, my own eyes betraying the lie. Work is hard for her. The kids are a handful. She's busy, that's all. I'd cling to those excuses like a drowning woman to a piece of driftwood. But deep down, in the quiet, vulnerable corners of my heart, a part of me knew the truth. This wasn't just stress. This increasing resentment, this growing distance, it had been building for months, eroding the very foundation of our relationship bit by bit. Like the relentless drip of water on stone, slowly, imperceptibly, wearing it away until there was nothing left but a hollowed-out shell. It felt like I was shrinking in her eyes, becoming smaller, less significant, until I was barely visible at all. And the worst part? I was starting to believe it myself. That maybe, just maybe, I was becoming too much, a burden. My chest would ache, a dull, persistent throb every time I thought about it. I'd try to distract myself, to focus on my sewing, but the feeling of being unwanted, of being a nuisance, would just creep back in, suffocating me slowly. It was a slow, agonizing death of what I thought was an unbreakable bond, and I was powerless to stop it. That day, it felt like any other day, you know? Just another Tuesday, another routine doctor's appointment for my aching joints. I was already feeling that familiar knot of dread in my stomach, the one that tightened every time I had to ask Anna for a ride. She'd picked me up from my tiny apartment, the one I'd lived in since Mateo passed, the same one where I'd raised her. And the silence in the car was thick, heavy with her unspoken impatience. I tried to make small talk, point out a new mural on a wall, mention a neighbor's new baby, but her responses were monosyllabic grunts, her gaze fixed rigidly on the road ahead, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I could feel the tension radiating off her, a palpable heat that made my skin prickle. We were halfway there, on the edge of the city, where the familiar, chaotic charm of the barrio roads gives way to wider, faster, less personal streets. The landscape was changing, and I didn't realize my life was about to change even more drastically. Then, without a word, she suddenly veered right and pulled over sharply near a bus stop. The jolt threw me forward a little, and I instinctively grabbed the dashboard. My heart leaped into my throat. What's wrong? I thought, my mind racing. A flat tire? Did she suddenly remember an urgent errand? Before I could even open my mouth, before I could ask what was happening, her eyes, cold and devoid of any warmth I recognized, darted to the back seat. She reached over, grabbed my small plastic bag of clothes, the one I always kept in the car for emergencies, or for the rare occasions she'd grudgingly allow me to stay overnight at her place, and shoved it into my hands. It was a flimsy thing, just a nightgown, a spare blouse, my rosary beads, a toothbrush. But in that moment, it felt like my entire life's worth of possessions, thrust back at me. Her voice, when it came, was a cold slap across my face. It was sharp, utterly devoid of the warmth that once defined her, cutting through the heavy air like a knife. "I'm tired of taking care of you," she said, her lips barely moving, her eyes fixed on some point beyond me, as if I wasn't even there. Each word was a physical blow, sharper than any slap. "You're ungrateful and dramatic." My breath caught in my throat, a sudden painful gasp that left me lightheaded. Ungrateful? Dramatic? The words echoed in the sudden ringing silence of the car. I couldn't process them, My mind, bless its old slow gears, just stalled. I wanted to ask what? Why? What are you talking about, mi amor? But no sound came out. My tongue felt thick, useless. Before I could even form a single coherent thought, before I could ask what was happening, what I had done to deserve this, she just pointed to the door. Get out. It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered with an icy finality that chilled me to the bone. My hand instinctively went to the door handle, but it wasn't my decision. It was an execution. I fumbled with the latch, my fingers suddenly clumsy, numb. I stumbled out onto the cracked pavement, the small plastic bag clutched in my shaking hands, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. I watched her, my own flesh and blood, my daughter, as she put the car in drive. She didn't spare me another glance, not a flicker of emotion, not a moment of hesitation. Then, with a roar of the engine and a squeal of tires, she drove away, leaving me standing there, utterly bewildered, stranded on the side of a busy road with nowhere to go. The smell of exhaust fumes hung in the hot air, a bitter farewell. It was over. My world, my understanding of my own daughter, shattered in that instant. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching her brake lights shrink to tiny red pinpricks in the distance, then vanish completely around that bend in the road. The roaring sound of her engine, the one I'd heard countless times, faded into the general hum of city traffic, leaving behind a silence that felt deafening, crushing. My hands, still clutching that flimsy plastic bag, a few clothes, my rosary, a worn photo of Mateo, started to tremble uncontrollably. The plastic crinkled loudly in the sudden, desolate quiet, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed my predicament. My knees felt like they'd turned to water, threatening to give out beneath me, and a wave of nausea washed over me, a bitter, metallic taste rising in my throat. A part of me, the eternal optimist, the mother who always believed in the absolute best of her child, screamed in my head, "She'll come back. She's just angry." This is a terrible, horrible mistake. She'll realize what she's done. She has to. I strained my ears, my every nerve ending on high alert, half expecting to hear the screech of tires, her car turning around, rushing back to scoop me up, to apologize, to tell me it was all a terrible misunderstanding. But the street remained brutally, unforgivingly silent, save for the distant drone of passing vehicles that paid me no mind. No one even glanced my way, an old woman stranded by a bus stop, just another anonymous face in a city of millions. Then, a colder, harder truth began to claw its way up from the pit of my stomach, a truth I'd been suppressing for months, years even. This hadn't just happened in an instant, a sudden outburst of frustration. Oh no. This had been building. It had been building for months, for years. Every annoyed sigh, every rushed visit, every glance that said I was inconvenient, a burden, a nuisance, every time she'd looked at her watch with barely disguised impatience when I was talking. It had all been leading to this moment, eroding our connection, brick by painful, heartbreaking brick, until there was nothing left but this hollowed-out shell of a relationship. I was disposable, just like that. The shame was a hot, prickly flush that spread over my face, making my cheeks burn, even though there was no one around to see my humiliation. Shame for needing help, for being so dependent, for being disposable. The words she'd spat at me, ungrateful and dramatic, burned in my ears, echoing the worst fears I'd secretly harbored. Had I been? Was I? A deep, burning ache settled in my chest, right where my heart usually beat its steady rhythm. And then a different kind of heat, a slow, incandescent rage, began to simmer beneath the shame, spreading like wildfire through my veins. Rage at her, for her cruelty, for her callousness, for shattering my world with such a cold, indifferent flick of her wrist. But even more, rage at myself. How could I have raised a child capable of such an act? How could I have been so blind, so foolish, so utterly devoted to someone who saw me as nothing more than a hindrance? My heart, already aching, felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, a physical pain that rivaled the emotional wound. The world, my safe, predictable world, the one built around my daughter, had just shattered into a million sharp, glittering pieces around my feet. The ground beneath me felt unstable, precarious, just like our little house on the hillside barrio after a heavy rain. My legs, still feeling like jelly, finally gave way, and I found myself collapsing onto the cold, unforgiving curb. The rough concrete pressed against my thighs, a stark, physical reminder of my new, brutal reality. I was alone, on the street, with nothing but a flimsy plastic bag and a heart that felt irrevocably broken. The dizziness returned, making the cars whizzing by blur into streaks of meaningless color. I closed my eyes tightly, wishing I could disappear, wishing I could just wake up from this nightmare. But the smell of exhaust fumes, acrid and real, lingered in the hot air, a bitter, constant reminder that this was no dream. This was my life now. Just as I managed to lower myself onto the cold, unforgiving curb, my body still shaking violently, my head spinning like a top, a jarring honk split the air behind me. My heart, already a bruised, fluttering mess, leaped into my throat, a sudden, painful lurch that made me gasp. My eyes, which I hadn't even realized were squeezed shut, flew open, wide and tear-filled. Oh God, now what? I braced myself, my shoulders hunching, expecting the worst. I imagined an angry driver, probably a young man, leaning out his window, ready to yell at this old woman who was clearly in the way, who didn't belong anywhere, who was just a nuisance on his already frustrating commute. My cheeks burned with renewed shame, even as I prepared for the inevitable public scolding. Instead, the car, a dark blue sedan, newer than Anna's, a little more upscale, didn't just speed past. It parked a little ahead, maybe 20 feet or so, just past the bus stop shelter. My breath hitched. What's happening? I watched, my vision still blurry from the tears and dizziness, as the driver's side door opened. A man got out. He wasn't young, not really, maybe in his late 40s, early 50s. He was dressed neatly, a crisp shirt, dark trousers. He closed his door with a soft thud and started walking towards me. My first instinct was to shrink smaller, to make myself invisible against the grimy concrete. I didn't want to be seen. Not like this. He walked with a purpose, not a hurried aggression, but a steady, calm stride. My eyes, despite my desire to look away, were fixed on him, trying to decipher his intentions. As he got closer, his face became clearer. He had kind eyes, a little tired perhaps, but gentle. He stopped a few feet from me, and my breath caught again. He looked directly at me, not at the ground, not past me, but right into my eyes. And then he spoke, his voice calm, gentle, a soothing balm after Anna's harsh words. "Senora Teresa?" he asked, like he'd been looking for me all along, like he knew exactly who I was and why I was there. My mind, still struggling to catch up, reeled. How does he know my name? A flicker of recognition, faint and hazy, started to spark in the far corners of my memory. The gentle eyes, the slight curve of his nose. It was familiar, but from so long ago, from another life almost. Yes, that's me," I stammered, my voice a croaky whisper, raw from the shock and the silent sobs. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "I thought it was you," he said. And then, the words that followed felt like a jolt of electricity, a lifeline thrown just as I was drowning. "It's Diego, señora, Diego Morales. My mother was Doña Elena. You worked for her decades ago, remember? Diego, Elena's son, the little boy with the mischievous grin, who used to try and steal cookies from the kitchen while I was cleaning, the one I used to mend his torn school trousers for." My heart, which had been in a state of freefall, suddenly felt a strange, impossible lightness. He was no stranger at all. He was a ghost from a kinder past. He knelt down slightly, bringing himself closer to my eye level, his gaze full of a profound, almost heartbreaking empathy. "My mother, she passed away a few months ago, Señora Teresa," he began, his voice softening even more. My throat tightened. Elena, my old employer, who had always treated me with respect, like a person, not just a maid. "She left me a letter, a very specific instruction. She told me to find you. She said, "Find Teresa, Diego, and make sure she never feels alone the way I did after your father passed. She always admired your strength, your spirit." Tears, hot and fresh, streamed down my face now. But these were different. These were tears of bewildered gratitude, of a profound, aching relief. Elena, even from beyond, was looking out for me. It was too much. My hands started to shake again, but this time it felt different. Less like fear, more like an overwhelming wave of emotion. Diego paused, his eyes flicking from my tear-streaked face to the pitiful plastic bag in my lap, and then back up the street, where Anna's car had vanished. There was a hard, knowing glint in his kind eyes then. "And when I saw what just happened," he continued, his voice tight with a quiet indignation that echoed my own. "When I saw that woman push you out of her car like trash, Senora, I knew I had found you, and I knew exactly what my mother meant. The fact that someone saw it, that someone witnessed Anna's cruelty, that it wasn't just a nightmare in my head, a private humiliation. It was real, and someone else knew. It was like a weight, a heavy, suffocating stone, was lifted from my chest. I didn't have to pretend, didn't have to explain. He had seen. He stood up then, offering me a steady hand. "You're not alone, Senora Teresa," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "My mother wouldn't have it. I have a small guest house behind my home. It's empty. You will come live there for now, while we sort things out. It's what she would have wanted. It's what I want." I couldn't speak. The words were stuck somewhere behind the lump in my throat. This miracle, this absolute unbelievable lifeline, thrown to me just as I was about to sink completely. One moment, I was utterly abandoned. A discarded old woman on a curb, my world shattered. The next, a ghost from my past, a kind, strong man, was offering me shelter, understanding, and a validation that I wasn't, in fact, disposable. The warmth of his hand, firm and steady as he helped me slowly, shakily, to my feet, felt like the first real human touch I'd received in what felt like an eternity. It was a dizzying, terrifying, beautiful shift. My broken life, with one simple act of kindness, had just changed direction entirely. Diego's kindness, honestly, it was overwhelming. Terrifying almost. After years of feeling like I was shrinking, becoming smaller, less significant in Anna's eyes, after constantly being told, implicitly and explicitly, that I was a burden, a drain on her resources and her precious time, suddenly having someone offer help so freely, so unconditionally, it felt like a trap. My mind, still reeling from the abandonment, just couldn't reconcile it. Every time Diego would offer to get me something, or ask if I was comfortable in the small, clean guest house behind his home, I'd flinch. It was an involuntary reaction, a deep-seated instinct to push away help, to minimize my needs, to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. I'd catch myself holding my breath, my shoulders tensing, bracing for the inevitable sigh, the roll of the eyes, the subtle shift in tone that would signal my imposition. He was so patient, though. He'd just smile gently, those kind, tired eyes crinkling at the corners, and say, "Senora Teresa, my mother would never forgive me. Please just let me help. You're family now." Family. The word felt foreign, fragile, almost too beautiful to touch. It had been so long since I felt truly like family to anyone, not since Mateo. I found myself struggling, truly struggling to accept his offers, no matter how small. A cup of coffee, a blanket for the cooler evenings, a ride to the pharmacy. My internal monologue was a constant battle. Don't ask for too much. Don't be a nuisance. You'll eventually become a problem for him too, just like you were for Anna. The fear was a cold, constant knot in my stomach, a familiar ache that had been my companion for so long. And then there was Anna. Oh, I knew her. I knew her better than anyone. A part of me, a small, dark, cynical part that had been sharpened by her cruelty, already knew exactly what she was doing, what she was saying. She wouldn't just disappear. She would manipulate the story, crafting a narrative as intricate and false as any telenovela. I could picture her now, already on the phone with our relatives, with her husband's family, painting herself as the exhausted, saintly daughter who had done everything she could, who had bent over backward, who had sacrificed her own happiness for her demanding, ungrateful mother. She would tell them how I, her difficult, dramatic, ungrateful mother, had chosen to run off with some random man, leaving her heartbroken and abandoned after all her selfless care. The thought of her twisting the truth, of her cementing her victim status while my reputation was dragged through the mud, filled me with a quiet, simmering fury. It was a slow burn, a deep, incandescent rage that spread through my chest, making my hands clench involuntarily. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but I was so tired. So utterly, completely tired. It was during one of these moments of reflection, sitting quietly in the small, comfortable guest house, the scent of lemon polish and old paper filling the air, that Diego came in. He had offered to help me sort through the few meager papers I had managed to grab, the ones stuffed haphazardly into that plastic bag. Old photos, a few letters from Mateo, some faded utility bills. He sat patiently on the floor, sifting through the stack with a respectful quietude. My heart felt heavy watching him. Was I just replacing one burden for another? Would he, too, eventually grow tired of me? Then his fingers paused on a thick, worn envelope, tucked deep within a bundle of old, meaningless receipts. It was yellowed with age, slightly dog-eared with my name, Teresa, scrawled on it in Mateo's familiar hand. My breath hitched. I hadn't seen that envelope in years, decades maybe. "What's this, Señora Teresa?" he asked gently, holding it up. My mind raced, trying to remember. I vaguely recalled something from after Mateo passed, when I got his small inheritance. I took the envelope from him, my fingers trembling slightly as I broke the brittle seal. Inside, folded neatly, was a single sheet of paper. It was a contract. My eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, the legal-ish jargon that had seemed so important at the time. It was the contract from when I'd lent Anna a large sum of money from that inheritance. It was meant to help her with the down payment on her first apartment, a way to give her a start. She'd been so grateful then, so full of promises. I'd completely forgotten I'd even made her sign anything, or perhaps more accurately, I'd chosen to forget, because the idea of needing such a document with my own daughter had always felt distasteful. But there it was, clear as day, her signature, bold and looping, at the bottom. And right above it, in a clause I hadn't truly believed would ever matter, was the agreement. She would repay the money, with a small interest, if she ever abandoned me without ensuring my proper care and well-being. The words jumped off the page, stark and undeniable. Abandoned me without ensuring my care. The irony, the sheer brutal irony, made a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, quickly stifled. Diego, who had been watching my face, saw the shift. The initial confusion, then the dawning realization, then the cold, hard glint in my eyes. He gently took the paper from my shaking hand, his gaze sweeping over the words. His brow furrowed, then slowly, a look of quiet understanding, almost grim satisfaction, spread across his face. He looked at me, his eyes now reflecting a shared resolve. In that moment, holding that worn piece of paper, a new plan began to form, clear and sharp in my mind. It wasn't just about the money, not really. It was about the truth. It was about showing Anna and everyone else who would listen to her twisted narrative exactly who she was. It was a way to defend myself, not with tears or pleas, but with undeniable proof. This wasn't just a contract. It was a hidden weapon, a key to unlock the truth, and a way to finally, irrevocably, reclaim my story from her grasp. The quiet fury that had been simmering within me solidified into a cold, determined resolve. I wasn't a burden. I was a woman with rights, with a history, and with a truth that needed to be heard. Anna, true to form, didn't waste any time. The phone call came less than a week after she'd abandoned me. Not from her, of course, but from my sister-in-law, Elena, Mateo's sister, not Diego's mother. Elena's voice was laced with a bewildered concern, but also a hint of judgment. "Teresa, Anna called us. She's She's very upset. Says you've just disappeared. Moved in with some man? She's organized a small family gathering this Sunday to explain everything. She's worried sick, you know. My blood ran cold, then simmered with that quiet fury. Worried sick? The gall of that woman. She was already spinning her web, painting herself as the heartbroken victim, the long-suffering daughter abandoned by her flighty, ungrateful mother. Diego was right there listening, and his hand briefly touched my arm, a silent anchor. I could almost hear the whispers already circulating through our family networks, the judgment, the pity, the way my name was being dragged through the mud. That Sunday, the air felt thick and heavy, charged with unspoken accusations and forced pleasantries. Anna's house, usually a place of boisterous family chatter, was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. Relatives I hadn't seen in months, some even years, were scattered around the living room. Perched on the edges of sofas and armchairs, their faces a mixture of curiosity, pity, and thinly veiled disapproval. They all knew something had happened, and Anna, with her tear-stained eyes and mournful posture, was already holding court, whispering her version of events to a small group, her voice a low, pathetic drone. Diego and I walked in together, quietly. His presence, tall and steady beside me, felt like a solid shield, a warmth against the chill of that room. My heart was thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a strange mix of fear and a cold, unwavering resolve. I could feel the tremor in my hands, but I kept my chin up. As the door clicked shut behind us, every head in the room swiveled. The murmurs died down completely, replaced by a collective gasp, then whispers, like the rustling of dry leaves. Anna, who had been mid-sentence, her hand pressed dramatically to her chest, froze. Her eyes, wide with shock, locked onto mine, then darted to Diego, then back to me, a flicker of raw panic replacing her feigned sadness. Her husband, Carlos, looked utterly bewildered, his brow furrowed in confusion, clearly caught off guard. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the distant sounds of city traffic. I let her talk first. I really did. I watched her, composed and still, as she stumbled through her carefully rehearsed narrative. Her voice, though shaky with manufactured emotion, was still sharp enough for me to pick up the familiar threads of her lies. "Mama, she just left," she wailed, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue she'd clearly brought for the purpose, strategically positioning herself so everyone could see her distress. I tried everything, I gave her everything, but she's always been so difficult, so dramatic. And then she just ran off with this man. I don't even know who he is. After all I've done for her, all my sacrifices. Her eyes flicked to Carlos, then to his parents, Doña Sofia and Don Ricardo, seeking their sympathy, their validation. Her in-laws sat stiffly on the sofa, their expressions a blend of concern for Anna and a palpable judgment towards me. They were known for being family first, and Anna was painting me as the ultimate family betrayer, a selfish old woman abandoning her devoted daughter. Each word she uttered was like a tiny needle pricking my skin, but I held firm, feeling Diego's silent support beside me. He stood just slightly behind me, a steady presence, his gaze unwavering, a silent promise. My hands, which I could feel starting to clench into fists, relaxed slightly, remembering the contract, the hidden weapon. This wasn't about drama. This was about truth. My heart ached, but it also hammered with a growing sense of purpose. When there was a lull, a moment of hushed silence as Anna paused for dramatic effect, gathering another fake sob, I took my chance. My voice, when I spoke, was quiet, steady, almost unnervingly calm, a stark contrast to her theatrical performance. "Anna," I began, my gaze sweeping across the room, meeting each questioning eye. "There's something you forgot to mention." The air crackled with tension. Every eye in the room was on me. Anna's head snapped up, her face a mask of indignation mixed with a dawning fear. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into the small handbag Diego had insisted I carry. A much nicer bag than my old plastic one. a small detail that felt significant, and pulled out the yellowed, folded contract. My fingers felt surprisingly steady. The silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I laid it on the polished mahogany coffee table, right in the center, between a vase of lilies and a plate of untouched cookies. The paper, old as it was, looked stark and undeniable against the gleaming wood, a silent, damning testament. "This," I continued, my voice gaining a quiet strength, "is a contract from many years ago, when I lent Anna a significant sum of money from her father's inheritance to help her with her first apartment." I paused, letting that sink in. Many of them knew Mateo had left me a small inheritance, but few knew I'd given a large chunk of it to Anna. On this contract, I pointed to the relevant clause with a steady finger, making sure everyone saw it. It clearly states that if she ever abandoned me without ensuring my proper care and well-being, she would repay that money, with interest. My eyes met Anna's, and for the first time I saw genuine, unadulterated fear, not manufactured sadness, flash in their depths. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then I looked at the assembled family, my voice still calm, but with an edge of steel. Every word was precise, factual, emotionless, a cutting counterpoint to her performance. This past Tuesday, on the way to a doctor's appointment, Anna pulled her car over. She took my bag, the one with my few clothes, my rosary, and a toothbrush, and she shoved it into my hands. She told me she was tired of taking care of me, that I was ungrateful and dramatic, and she ordered me out of her car on the side of a busy street, with no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. My voice didn't waver. The raw, brutal facts spoke for themselves, stark and unembellished. She drove away and left me there. A collective gasp swept through the room, louder this time, filled with genuine shock. Doña Sofia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror, a sound of distress escaping her lips. Don Ricardo leaned forward, his face etched with disbelief and disgust, his usual jovial demeanor completely gone. Carlos, Anna's husband, looked utterly devastated. His jaw dropped, and he stared at Anna, then at the contract, then back at his wife, as if seeing her for the very first time, the illusion of his devoted wife shattering before his eyes. Is this true, Anna?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, thick with betrayal and confusion. You kicked your mother out of the car? And you owe her money? All this time you said you were helping her, that she was just difficult." He immediately turned to her, his voice rising, demanding, "Show me your bank transfers. Show me the records of you helping her. Everything." I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to yell or cry or defend myself. The truth, laid bare and undeniable, did all the work for me. The contract, a silent witness, spoke volumes, echoing the betrayal in that quiet room. Anna's carefully constructed facade crumbled right before my eyes. She sputtered, her face flushing crimson, then paling, sweat beading on her forehead. She tried to deny it, to backtrack, to spin new excuses, but her words were weak, desperate, and drowned out by the rising tide of murmurs and shocked whispers from the family. Her in-laws, who had always prided themselves on their family values, looked at her with utter disgust, their faces a roadmap of their shattered illusions. The reverence they'd held for their saintly daughter-in-law evaporated into thin air. By the end of that excruciating evening, Anna's halo had not just slipped. It had shattered into a million pieces, glinting sharp and cold on the floor. Her reputation, meticulously crafted over years, lay in tatters. And more importantly, her access to Carlos's wallet, the one she used to fund her comfortable lifestyle while claiming poverty for her mother, did too. Carlos, deeply humiliated and clearly feeling betrayed, had already started making calls from the next room, demanding to see financial statements, his trust utterly broken. He looked at me with a profound sadness, a silent apology in his eyes as we left. Meanwhile, my life with Diego had quietly, beautifully begun to formalize. I helped care for his 2 school-age children after school, cooking them traditional snacks, helping with homework, and mending their clothes. It felt good to be useful, truly useful, not just a burden. I felt my hands, once so tired, now had purpose again. In return, He helped me manage my finances, the small pension Mateo had left me, and soon, the money Anna would be legally obligated to repay. And he made sure I got to all my doctor's appointments, even coming in with me to advocate for my care. I had a purpose, a sense of belonging, a quiet dignity I hadn't realized I'd lost until I found it again. I found myself smiling more, laughing with the children, feeling a lightness in my chest that had been absent for years. Being thrown out of that car felt like the absolute end of my story, the final humiliating chapter. Meeting Diego and finding that contract showed me it was just the end of a chapter. A painful, terrible chapter, yes, but not the end of the book. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't making Anna suffer, though I won't lie. Seeing her face fall was a small, satisfying spark. No, the real revenge was realizing I was never the burden she said I was, that her cruelty was about her, not me. It was about reclaiming my narrative, making sure she could never again rewrite my life as if I were a disposable inconvenience. It was about standing tall, finally, and recognizing my own worth. So, Reddit, after all this, Aita for exposing my daughter's abandonment and debt at a family gathering, effectively shattering her reputation and financial standing with her in-laws? Was I right to use that old contract to defend myself, or did I go too far?